Well, good afternoon and welcome to Mondays with Michael live here on Facebook. Hoping that everyone had a nice weekend. I know most places around the country are opening up a bit. We're still waiting for a little more of Northern Virginia to open up a little bit. We're in phase one. Hoping to get into phase two sometime soon. I'm really feeling for those small businesses and restaurants that are really just having a real tough time. So hopefully phase two for us this weekend, but we'll find out later on this week from the governor. As you know, I'm doing this four-part series on getting employees back to work, some things that small business owners and HR executives are pondering, thinking about, wondering about as they start bringing people back to work. Last week was all about the physical workplace. So if you haven't seen that one, it's archived here on the page. It's also out there on LinkedIn and Twitter and my Facebook page. So go back and check it out. You'll be able to see my thoughts around the physical workplace. Today's session is really around some of the legal issues and some of the other challenges that small business owners and HR executives are going to have to think through. And some of this is really for the first time because we are in like uncharted waters here. So I've done some research over the past week. I'm just going to give you some things I'm seeing and I'm reading about. I'm also at the end of this going to give you some place where you can get some more resources because I think more information around this is good. So let's talk about this. So the first thing we're hearing about from small business owners and HR executives is this whole legal liability. What is the legal risk to employers of bringing people back to work? And what is the legal risk to employers or small business owners if they open up their businesses and someone were to get COVID? So let's do the first one. So if you're in a corporation and you bring your employees back and for some reason your employee catches COVID at the workplace, what does that mean for you as an employer? What liability do you have? Is it workman's comp at that point? And doing my research, looking at what some of the lawyers are saying, at least they're putting out there, it's a little gray right now. It depends on what states do and whether states pass legislation or Congress passes legislation to protect employers in some of these cases. So I think there's a little gray area here right now around legal liability if someone catches COVID who's an employee. Now that said, what if somebody catches COVID on your workplace and they're not an employee? They're either a customer or somebody coming to your workplace, a client coming into a workplace to see one of your employees, and that person brings in COVID. So again, I don't know what happens there, and I think a lot of legal experts are going to not really know what happens now. They're going to have to figure out some of this employment stuff when it comes to clients and customers who contract COVID at the workplace. I am reading that documentation here is really, really important. It's very important to openly communicate with your employees. Again, you'll get to that when you start doing the physical workplace. But again, letting your employees know this is going to be happening is very, very, very important. Second thing I wrote down here is to make sure you're following CDC and Osha guidelines. Some of the legal stuff I'm reading is that if your organization is following CDC, OSHA, and state guidelines, the liabilities are a lot less. So whatever they're putting out, I know there's some things about CDC that are inconsistent, but OSHA has actually put out a lot. I'm going to show you some stuff that OSHA has put out. OSHA has really put out a lot of information around protecting the workplace and protecting employees. So if you're following those guidelines, your liability may be less. But again, I think we need to see how this plays out. The payroll protection program. A lot of companies, small and large, went after and received payroll protection money. Now, there has been some updates to PPP. There has been documentation about that. The employers now have more time to pay it back. As you know, the program is designed to keep people on the payroll or to bring people back and keep them on the payroll. But as you also know that unemployment insurance bonuses, or I should say bonuses, extra money was giving out in the CARES Act. So employees were making $600 more a week on top of their normal unemployment benefits. So there are a lot of employees that just don't want to come back to work right now until this runs out. And that would happen. I mean, that may happen. So how does the employer get protected with PPP? Now, again, there's some documentation out there. I would take a look at it, but the way it sounds is if you offer the job back to the employee and they refuse to get it back and you document all this, you are protected a little more under PPP. But I would check with the regulations, but that's something that employers are going to need to work through. And again, there's a lot of great information out there. The other thing is, again, this is all new. So the other thing that the employers have to think about are this whole temperature checks, contact tracing. And I think this is going to be something unique, and it's going to be something that we're going to see how it plays out because there's a lot of challenges when it comes to both of these. I mean, temperature checks when you get to work every day. Again, part of that we talked about last week is how do you physically do that in a large corporation? And what happens is somebody actually, temperature's too high. Do you send them home? Do they get a comp day? Do they get paid? What happens at that point? Do they get tested? Do they get tested for COVID at the workplace? Do they get directed to one of the testing facilities? What happens at that point? The other is contact tracing. I still don't know how this is going to work. I think there's a lot of discussion around it. I think there's going to be a lot of trial and error, but I think contact tracing is going to be difficult for employees to work through, employers to work through, HR directors to work through. Because, HIPAA still comes into play here. If somebody is diagnosed with COVID at your workplace, you're really not allowed to tell the rest of the employees about that. And everything I'm reading is consistent with there. So if Mary comes to you and you're an HR executive and Mary ends up having COVID, you can't tell anyone else at the workplace. I had one of our clients actually go through this. They had a training class in early March. One of the participants was diagnosed with COVID when they went back to their workplace. This was a convening of a group. And though the rest of the class was told that someone in the class had COVID, they weren't allowed to tell who it was. So there's that whole part of that process, who knows internally. But then it is, the government is going to be responsible for contact tracing. So are you as an HR director going to call the state agency to tell them that Mary now has COVID and to come in and interview Mary? And is Mary going to be comfortable telling that state government person about every place they've been the last 2, 3, 4, 5 days? Names and phone numbers of everybody they've talked to and where they've been? I don't know. I mean, it may work. I don't know if it's going to work. I think some of this is going to have to play out and see what happens. Now, there are apps that are available to corporations to have employees download, but would you require your employees to download an app? I don't know. Some employers may say yes, some employers may say no. Some employees may say yes, some employees may say no. Is it a company phone that you're downloading it on, or is it a personal phone you're downloading it on? So again, these are things that are going to need to be worked out. Need to be worked out. And I'm actually interested to see how this plays out, because a lot of Northern Virginia companies here are going to go down this road, and when we get to phase 2 and phase 3, we get more people in the workplace. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out. Also, I do want to give you some resources. So some resources that I've been checking into and are really, really good. I encourage you to check them out. For those who are members of SHRM had a couple articles out. One on contact tracing I thought was very, very well done, and one on the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. These are downloadable. They're free on their website. Really, really good information. I'm on a Department of Labor newsletter, which I get fairly regularly. As you know, part of my work in the past was with the workforce boards, and some of the email lists I've been on, I've just decided to stay on, and the DOL newsletter list is one I stay on. And the DOL has put out a lot of great information, specifically from Osha, some Osha guidelines, some CDC guidelines, but they have a lot of industry-specific guidelines when it comes to Osha. And as we talked about last week with working from home, I think you're going to have to really keep an eye on the Osha stuff, because OSHA is going to put out some regs that you're really going to have to follow internally, but they also may put out some regs when it comes to, this whole permanently working at home, which I think we talked about last week. I'm not a real big fan of permanently working at home. I mean, I permanently work at home. I choose to permanently work at home, but I'm actually out in the community quite a bit too. But to have your employees permanently work at home may be some OSHA things that you may have to think about moving forward. I don't think it's a great idea, but that's just me. It may help with recruiting. I've seen some stories of some of the business channels where companies that were located in these large cities with a lot of COVID are now considering hiring employees and having employees from around the country work from home. If you work from home is going to be a permanent solution to a recruiting problem, you can recruit anywhere. Somebody from Iowa can work for an organization in New York City, or someone from Florida can work somewhere in Washington, D.C. I mean, these are cities that are having a tough time. They're still closed. They may just go out and recruit from other places around the country. And how does that help, or how does that change the dynamic of the workplace? I'm not sure. Those are all things that need to play out. I see we're coming up to the end of our time here. I would check out the resources. My session next week, session 3 around this, is all around employee emotional health, the emotional health of the employees, how they can feel about coming back to work. A lot of stuff to talk about tomorrow. Come back and join me with part 3. This is Mondays with Michael live here on Facebook. Have a great week. I'll talk to you next Monday. Bye.